Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 23 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He's 178 centimeters tall, he's had laser eye surgery, and he's happiest on rainy days. Welcome back, Dr. Mike.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be back here again from the very epicenter of world hypnosis, Toronto, Canada, where we are broadcasting from. And we just had a great lunch. This is a podcast going out to the universe about hypnosis, NLP, thinking skills, and all of the above, how to have a better life.
And so today we have an interesting podcast. I think everyone's going to enjoy this one. We want to talk about quite a few things. In particular, some of the things might be a little controversial for other people who have trained.
Oh, no, not controversy.
Oh, no, we don't talk about controversy. In all honesty, though, we are going to address a topic here that people who have been trained elsewhere poorly don't get. And that is the topic of hypnotizability.
Oh, gosh, spare me this one.
Yeah, so
I know.
In fact, well, let's just dive right into it, shall we?
Let's dive into it. Chris and I read an article. See, you got to understand, on my email account, I get updates every day about anything to do with hypnosis happening anywhere in the world.
The wonder of Google Alerts, right?
Wonder of Google News Service clipping alerts, whatever it's called. Anyway, and so I'm always finding out what's happening with hypnosis. And the other day there was an alert, and basically at one of the major universities / medical centers, some research had been done.
Stanford.
But we're not going to mention the name. And they made a discovery regarding executive function and all of these different things of the brain and determined that they could see what the hypnotic state was. Because what they did was they took 12 really good hypnotic subjects and
12 really bad hypnotic subjects,
actually,
whatever that means. 12
unhypnotizable people, whatever that is. And with these 24 people, drew this conclusion as to which parts of the brain were lighting up and cooperating with each other during hypnotic states. Now, I immediately posted a response to this because it leaves out the crucial bit of information. Who says these 12 people are highly hypnotizable and 12 aren't? Who's determining that? What means are they using to determine that? What inductions have they done? Are they playing a tape to everybody and seeing who goes into trance and who doesn't? Which is typically what happens with these nonsensical figures and statements that people make. They'll say something like, 82% of people could not be hypnotized. Well, what it really means is that method on that day by that operator with that group yielded those results. But as all our students know, if you continually change your techniques without pointing out you're changing them, you can get people into very, very profound states, regardless of what they're coming in with. This nonsense about 12 unhypnotizable people then becomes the foundation of an entire neurological study.
I was just thinking in the back of my mind, I mean, if you were to do a study, like, how you get people on these coffee date ideas, like, a man and a woman will have a coffee date for like 2 minutes. And if they strike a rapport, then maybe they have another conversation at another time.
Or order another coffee.
Or whatever it is. But, you have to have rapport with your subject, right, if you're a hypnotist. And so imagine you're just playing a tape.
Stop thumping the table. Is the microphone
Am I thumping
on?
Oh, that's annoying, isn't it? So if you just play a tape and expect some hypnotic technique to work, of course it's only going to work on a certain percentage of that population. But if you're actually skilled at hypnosis and you actually know how to build rapport with your client, with your subject, you'll have a much greater result, and you'll be changing your technique if it doesn't work.
Yes, you're going to modify your technique to do whatever you have to put the person into a trance state. Not do one method on 24 people and go, well, it didn't work on these half, so they're poor hypnotic subjects.
Right. I mean, so imagine that, you have a robot at the other end of the coffee date table.
Yeah.
And that robot is speaking exactly the same words in exactly the same way, essentially with its eyes closed to what's actually going on.
So there's no calibration as to the behavior of the other people.
Well, what do you think the results are going to be? Of course they're going to be crap, right?
Well, this is kind of an interesting thing I see with academics a lot of the time, Chris. A number of years ago, maybe 8 years ago, a friend of mine, Dr. Arthur Perlini, who's professor of psychology and the dean of Algoma University, got me into an American Psychological Association symposium on hypnosis in Toronto, down at the Metro Convention Center. And I said, what kind of hypnosis will they do at a symposium? And his response amazed me. He said, well, they won't do any. I said, what? He said, oh, no, they won't take a chance on it not working. He said all they'll do is talk about hypnosis for an hour and a half. And that's exactly what they did. They didn't do any hypnosis. I think the academics, by and large, should leave it to the professional hypnotist, and they can correlate the results that the hypnotists bring them.
Right. Now, so this study that was done with the so-called 12 non-hypnotizable subjects, or whatever it was, it's even worse than if you were to do a stage hypnosis show where you are throwing a method at people that is going to generically work with the largest percentage of the population, but still doesn't work with everybody, right? We've talked about this on other podcasts.
One method for all.
Yeah, you've got to take a rapid fire method that will work with as many subjects as possible.
Language, please.
As many subjects as possible, but it's still not going to work.
You said possible.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, you want to use a method that's going to work across the board, a broad spectrum method. For example, when we put out a product, like one of our fine hypnosis CDs, we have to use one induction on each CD and presume it's going to be broad-based enough, broad spectrum enough to hit most people.
And because you're using an Ericksonian paradigm,
largely,
it is going to hit most people, but you still can't guarantee that 100% of the population
will go into trance to any degree the very first time they hear it.
And even those who do, it may not work the next day because they're in a different frame of mind or a different set of circumstances, whatever it is, right? I mean, it's not going to be a 100% solution for everybody every single time. And so that's
go with the big numbers.
This is why it's interesting to watch these these studies where somebody is essentially saying the presupposition right at the very beginning is, well, there is such a thing as a non-hypnotizable person.
To be non-hypnotizable basically states that you're stupid and have no powers of imagination whatsoever and no attention span.
Right. I mean, it's almost as if these people doing these studies that form these presuppositions in the first place don't even realize that, everybody daydreams, everybody dreams at night and has strange dreams that make no sense.
Everybody zones out during television watching.
Everybody goes into trance multiple times a day, every single day. And so to say somebody isn't hypnotizable is exactly what Mike just said. It's like saying you're stupid. You can't possibly go into a state where you're just daydreaming and solving your
zoning
own...
out and letting things work, yeah.
So there we go. So let's elaborate a little bit then. So when it comes to hypnotizability, from an Ericksonian paradigm, Mike, what is the belief that a hypnotist should hold?
Well, we typically believe, Chris, that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So in other words, the client is the one who creates, maintains, and terminates the trance. But we also maintain that hypnosis is by and large a learning state. It is the ultimate learning state. And learning about hypnosis is the ultimate learning for that reason, because you're in a learning state, learning about the state that is involved with learning. Hypnosis, wide awake now. So when you utilize this learning state of trance, the more accustomed you get to it, the greater trance depth you will get. So I think it was Erickson's best subject became his best subject after something like 300 inductions. There's a learning aspect to hypnosis. To throw some random method, probably a fairly jejune one at people, one evening and say, oh, half the people didn't go into it, that is less a comment on the subjects than it is a comment on the lack of skill of the hypnotist.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a sniper and you only hit your target 1 out of 10 shots, it just means you're a poor sniper, right?
Right. I'm trying to follow the logic with what you just said, Chris, and it's eluding me to a degree, but...
Well, it doesn't mean that the bullet isn't capable of hitting most targets.
No, you've got it backwards. What you're saying with, if the sniper 1 time out of 10 hits the person he's aiming at, that it's not a case of whether or not the bullet hits the target. It's blaming it on the victims for not getting killed by the bullet.
That's a better way. There you go. I even like that even more. I mean,
we can't blame the victims who missed being shot.
Yes, exactly.
And call it hypnosis.
But
it's essentially the same model, which is it's really, really pretty stupid. And it's like these, as we said in the course a week ago, the nonsensical idea of hypnosis scales. Do you use the Davis-Husband scale or the Harvard Standard Scale of Hypnotizability or the Friedlander-Sarbin scale or do you use the, whatever scale? I mean, it gets ridiculous. Scales are an attempt to digitize what is essentially analog phenomena and does not occur in sequence. A hypnotic depth scale is less a gauge as to someone's hypnotizability as it is a gauge as to the ineptitude of the hypnotist.
Which brings us to our point about some of the discussions that are going on in some of these online forums that we've seen. Let's talk about that now, shall we?
Online forums. There's all these hypnosis forums online, and I'm really pretty fed up with them, Chris, because
One in particular?
We've made, well, we won't mention it, but we've made postings in the past. We put up postings and, being slagged by a bunch of people who've taken a weekend-long hypnosis course, and I've just basically said, why am I wasting my time with these people? It's just gotten crazy. So I am now thinking that it may be time for you and I, through our reborn website, which is coming very soon, to create our own hypnosis forum, which will be the world gold standard as to what a hypnosis forum shall be. And we're going to eliminate a lot of the idiotic infighting and stupid inductions that are meaningless. And, sometimes you see people who are basically the inept, teaching the,
irrelevant
to the
ignorant.
Ignorant, yes, that'll work well. That's good alliteration. The inept teaching the irrelevant
to impress
the ignorant. Now we've got even greater degrees of alliteration there.
And let's make it clear, when we say ignorant, we're not talking about people who are dumb.
No.
What does ignorant really mean?
Well, it comes from the Greek gnosko, and it's from which we get the word agnostic, which is one who does not know. The A in agnostic is the alpha, and the alpha is negation in the Greek. Atheist is someone who postulates the non-existence of God. Agnosko is someone who does not know. It is someone who is agnostic, doesn't know. So we're taking the same root word, which is what we get an ignoramus from, people who are ignorant of a topic, but are speaking on it authoritatively. And we see it all the time in hypnosis more than pretty well any other field. Someone can take a weekend-long course and suddenly set himself up as an expert and teach absolute nonsense. So we are here to right the wrong, to wrestle the world of real trance back from the infidels, and provide world-class training and information from the epicenter of global hypnosis, Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, I love this because, the fact is very simple. You go into any online forum where people are poorly trained for the most part, and they act like they know a lot. They are talking about things they
know everything.
They really don't know much, which is fine, because if you're willing to say, I'm a novice at this and I don't know much, then at least you're open to learning. But they're acting as if what they know is absolute truth, and for the most part it's completely wrong. And therefore they're teaching things that are totally irrelevant for the purpose of impressing people who
are completely ignorant,
who are totally new to the topic, and maybe ignorant and interested, right?
But they don't have the schema to recognize that what they're being taught is nonsensical.
It's junk. So
it's a few years back we had the Sickort state. Now, if we're talking about in terms of hypnotic trance, there is hypnoidal states supposedly on the surface, like trances, medium trances that Dave Ellman said did not exist. They were simply a transitional form between a light trance and a somnambulistic or deep hypnotic state. Below that is the Esdale state, which is the basement of trance, where we get spontaneous general anesthesia and spontaneous full body catalepsy, unresponsiveness to suggestions that require any kind of activity, but still a very, very powerful and relaxing and healing state. And then bingo, all of a sudden we got a brand new state. It's the Sickort state. And guess where it came from? From a guy called Sickort. And this is a brand new one. It's even deeper. This is the Esdale state with rapid eye movement. Well, the funny thing is, if you don't know you're supposed to be producing rapid eye movement, you don't do it. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Sickort, I think you're dead. But let me tell you anyway, I found a new state. It's the Mandel state. It's below the Sickort state, 10 billion times deeper. And it's the Sickort state, which is the Ellman down to Esdale, down to rapid eye movement, except your left hand is raised in the air. And when you get that, you got the Mandel state, and it's the deepest of all.
And then you wake up and you realize the Sickort state doesn't exist.
Well, neither does the Mandel state. This stuff is nonsensical ways of people getting their name out there. Guys, we have a remarkable tool with hypnosis. This is not a sour grapes thing. It's let's forget about trying to make a name for ourselves with things we haven't got a damn clue about, and let's learn how to utilize these almost magical skills to help people. Let's make the world a better place. Hypnosis is phenomenal for that.
Yeah, now so while we're at it, how many times have you heard about somebody's improvement on the Dave Ellman induction?
Oh, I think there's probably somewhere between 15 and 20,000 improvements on the Dave Ellman induction. And
none of which are better.
Well, none of which are better. The fact with the Ellman induction is that is as close to a flawless induction as you can imagine. And any attempts to improve upon it always make it less effective. It's just the way it is.
Right. So we don't need to create the Mandel Ellman induction because there's no freaking point.
There's no point. It would suck compared to the Dave Ellman induction.
All right. Beautiful. So I hope we made our point clear about hypnotizability and all
Guys,
that
we're going to
stuff.
create a hypnotic forum for people who are really interested in learning about hypnosis, not interested in flaming each other and trying to make a name for themselves, but learning to be the best hypnotists we can possibly be and teaching others and helping others. If you're interested in a brand new hypnosis forum, which is going to be the gold standard, send us an email and we'll keep you involved.
Yeah, we'd love to know, because we are dead serious about setting this up and making sure that there's something out there of good quality. So before we totally drop the topic of hypnotizability, Chris, I did want to bring up one more thing. I was reading some of these posts people are talking about, and in fact, actually, this was inspired by somebody dropped a comment on one of the YouTube videos about the leverage inductions. I think it was, in this case, breathing with the hand. The demo you did, and if you want to Google this, folks, Google breathing with the hand induction Mike Mandel. You'll find it on YouTube.
Yep.
And this is a leverage induction, and it works very, very well.
Do you want to explain what you mean by that, Chris? I'd love to hear you explain. I know you're going to do a superbly gladiative job.
Let's see if I do a good job. So
leverage or leverage?
A leverage or leverage induction is where you are creating a state that is associated with trance, in this case, catalepsy of the arm. And by creating catalepsy, you are doing, as Clark Hall said in, was it 1943 or 33? 1933, anything or everything that assumes trance causes trance. And since in trance, or in hypnotic state, you should be able to create a cataleptic limb, i.e. a floating hand. Therefore, if you just create the floating limb, you automatically got a trance
you need. So, quite elementary.
So there you go. And of course, I've learned that from you, so hopefully I'm explaining it well. So breathing with the hand is an induction where you are never suggesting that the hand will float, but by doing what you do, and Mike demonstrates it beautifully in the YouTube video, you create that cataleptic state of the hand and you drive it deeper into trance.
You drive the person into trance.
Right.
Now, someone made a comment
that wouldn't this only work with a somnambule?
Yes, a somnambulist, somebody who is going to go into somnambulistic trance, and that I'm somehow cherry-picking and getting the right subject.
Yeah, you need a good subject for this?
Right, but to anybody who's seen me work live, you know that it makes no difference to me. I work with whoever is in front of me because I always operate from the standpoint of being able to get anybody into whatever trance I want. And since I've adopted that belief for a few decades now, I've found it tends to be the case. It's nothing to do with choosing the right subject. It's everything to do with correctly applying an adequate technique.
Yeah. Now, so, okay, as part of this discussion then, let's bring in the discussion of filming in the course on the Thursday. So
wasn't that funny?
Yeah. So when we were setting up for the filming, we had this really fantastic guy named Daniel and his crew, and they came
really top notch. Really did a great job.
They came in while we were having a lunch break, while a lot of the students were out having lunch. Mike and I came back early so that the film crew could help set up, and we set up the two chairs where Mike Mandel and one subject would be sitting to get the framing all set up. And so just to get a sense of the correct framing for the video,
so the camera would have their angles right for aiming at our hands and so on.
Right. We had Daniel, the guy who was in charge of the film crew, sit down and just I think I said something to you like, so just show him how you're going to be moving around a little bit.
Show him how you'll be moving around, how you'll be working with a subject
for the purposes of making sure everything is caught on film that needs to be caught on film.
And because I can't resist,
yeah, exactly.
I held my hand towards Daniel and locked focus on his eyes, and he looked at me. I took his hand, put it at a 45-degree angle, passed my hand in front of his eyes and said, "Eyes closed now." And his arm went completely cataleptic and hovered in the air, even though he did not have a clue what it was.
No, you never suggested catalepsy. Now, you essentially pre-framed it by, if we were going to be doing hypnosis...
Get the guard down.
I would be doing something like this. Can I borrow your hand? Now, any of you who purchased the Rapid Induction CD, or I should say the Power Induction, whatever we call it, the Power Induction DVD, not CD, there's a CD that will go along with it.
Power Induction program.
The Power Induction program, Mike will explain the Kinesthetic Ambiguity induction that he used. And it was hilarious because, again, Daniel probably had never experienced hypnosis in his life, never knew what it should look like. And Mike just pre-framed it as, we're just going to pretend for the purpose of making sure the filming is set up properly. And there he is sitting with his arm floating in the air. And then what did you do? What did you walk?
Well, I couldn't resist. I got up and walked across the room, walked away, and just left him there. And he sat there for about a minute with his eyelids fluttering like crazy and his hand floating in the air. And then he said, "Am I supposed to stay here? What? are you there? Like, it was
very,
hilarious. Very weird.
So at that point, he had essentially come out of the light trance he was already in. And he would have only been in a light trance at that point, but he was confused.
But if I had jumped in on it and said all the way into trance and given his hand a little shake, he would have dropped right down into a deep trance.
Especially if he was a willing participant looking for therapeutic help.
Some sort of change. Yeah, people come in wanting change, are already leveraged to the degree that they're at threshold. Something has to change. It has to be now, and it has to be me. And when someone is at that point, you don't get bad subjects. That's why I never had, in all my years of doing therapy, not one bad subject, not one resistant, refractory, whatever you want to call it, subject. Just educate people, and nothing keeps them out of trance except fear. So you educate them sufficiently that there is no fear, and they always go into hypnosis.
Yeah, so we could probably bring this back to things like the progressive relaxation trance and explain why does that not work. I mean, so what's happening when you're saying, or the direct authoritarian approach, maybe even better. So your eyes are getting tired. You are becoming sleepy. Your eyes are very heavy, much heavier now.
Your eyes are closing. Your eyelids are getting heavy.
And what is the analytical subject
And the person who's analytical is sitting there going, no, they're not, no, they're not, no, they're not, no, they're not. So instead of suggesting it, because everybody's heard, you need eye closure to get hypnosis. Well, you don't. But if you have it, it does expedite certain aspects of it. So instead of, your eyelids are getting heavy, your eyes are getting tired, they're burning, they're closing, they're not, no, they're not, no, they're not. You just say, close your eyes. You get exactly the same result.
Close your eyes. I mean, if your client is coming to you for help, he or she, just ask him to do what you want to do. You want him to close his eyes? Say, close your eyes.
Yeah.
You don't have to work so hard.
No,
right?
And that we run into working too hard a lot. We had a wonderful young guy in our course, The Architecture of Hypnosis, that just passed a couple of weeks ago by the time you hear this. His name was Arthur. Arthur is a really cool guy. He's got a great Russian accent. We call him the Leningrad Assassin. That's his hypnosis name.
And his octagon name.
And just a very cool guy, street hypnotist. He is, above everyone I've seen in quite a long time, a very natural hypnotist. He has the ability to learn how to layer things on very quickly. Now, of course, this can become a liability as well. So I wound up saying to him partway through the course, you're working way too hard. If you only need to do A, B, and C, there's no need to take them all the way up to letter R or S. You know what I mean? Keep it simple. Keep a stripped-down, simple approach. And I think he began to listen. And I to make it fair, I said, what I'm telling you is only the same thing I heard in my NLP training when Derek Balmer was training me. He said I was working way too hard. I guess in my early days, I was so scared of something in NLP not working that I was overdoing it. But you don't have to. Do it properly. It'll work anyway. So I think Arthur is developing some wonderful skills now. And I know he's hypnotizing virtually everybody who crosses his path.
I love watching him work because he's started coming to our jiu-jitsu class now. And so you'll just see him walk up to someone at the pub afterwards, and he'll just ask them if they know anything about hypnosis and if they want to experience it. And he's just dropping everybody into trance. It's great practice. I mean, he's going to get very good very fast because he has the guts to just go out and practice.
Plus, he has the advantage of the Russian accent, which I think he works very, very well to his advantage. Remember Kate in the class as well. Very nice young woman. Lovely, though. I mean, she looked like a Russian princess, and she had the Russian accent, too. I think they both use it to their advantage, which is unfair.
Yeah, it's very mesmeric. So, let's talk about instant inductions. This is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, because you've talked in the past, I don't know if you've talked about it on the podcast, but how they work in terms of a PGO spike through the brain.
Oh, okay.
And so I was hoping you could explain to people what is i.e. the theory behind these instant inductions, how a PGO spike works when you shock somebody. And then I wanted to ask you if instant inductions can work on someone who knows they're coming.
No, that's a very good question too, Chris. An instant induction or sledgehammer induction, one of which is on my rapid induction set program. At the very end, it's a bonus. And other inductions such as, long-term, slow, dragging out, painful inductions. There's a wide variety of them out there. And fast inductions like creating catalepsy and so on, rapid inductions, they're very useful. They only take a couple of minutes to create trance. But instant inductions or shock inductions really are instant. They're very, very quick. And what you need to create those, often you will set the stage with a number of suggestibility tests to build in Andre Weitzenhofer's heteroaction so that the brain becomes accustomed to building upon the previous tests and causing the person to respond more and more vigorously to each suggestion that you're offering after that. Well, an instant induction usually works on the heels of that. You can do them without any pre-framing, but they are most effective if you set up suggestibility tests first. Now, an instant induction might be like the one on the video. You have the person pressing down the palm of your hand. They're locking eyes with you. They're pressing harder and harder. You suddenly pull your hand away, tip their head forward, and yell, sleep, which slips past the critical faculty, in theory, causes a trance state to develop. If you have sufficient rapport, they will stay in trance. If you do not have sufficient rapport, they won't stay in trance. And there's all these wonderfully imaginative stories that are everything but true, spoken of by certain hypnosis instructors who I will not mention by name, but I'll give you a hint. This one says hypnotize and hypnotist, not understanding there is a letter N, as in Nevada, in the word. It's hypnotist, hypnotize. Well, this particular instructor tells a wonderfully imaginative and acid flashback story of how he was in the lobby of the Holiday Inn somewhere and went up and did sleep, 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 all these rapid inductions, and 24 people were standing in the lobby in trances. Never happened in a gajillion years, because they would all start coming out of it as soon as their brains made the requisite adjustments. You can get people into trance with instant inductions, but unless you immediately take control, maintain rapport, and begin to give instructions to fill the gap created by the PGO spike, they will come out of it. It just won't happen. Now, a PGO spike is when the shock factor or novelty factor of an induction, this is pure neuroscience 101, when this occurs, it causes a response in the pons, which is in the midbrain, which radiates upward in a rapid arc into the geniculate body of the brain, right into the occiput, which is the sight center at the back of the head. All resonates with the amygdala. This is emotional stuff. The startle, the novelty. This causes a rapid fire explosion of neural energy in this superhighway, which is part of our survival instinct. So the prefrontal cortex, where we have executive function, temporarily quiets down. It doesn't get the message, and the brain is on full alert for some sort of external that could be threatening, interesting, whatever. And at that moment, you can slip in and fire in a word like sleep or sleep now or something, and drop the person directly into trance before the prefrontal cortex and executive function have a chance to revive and figure out what's wrong and make the requisite changes.
And so if you don't have rapport ahead of time, and I noticed that you said you have to maintain rapport after you do an instant induction. You can't build it after the rapid induction, or
no, you can't.
You don't have it to build upon, right? You need to maintain it.
There must be some there already.
Right. So, which is why these things in a street hypnotist situation, you need to engage in discussion. You need to get people interested in what you're doing, have rapport, have genuine interest on the part of the other person, use some hetero action, yes sets and compliance sets.
Sure.
And then do the induction. Then you have rapport. And then they trust you and they know you're not looking to cause them problems. You're looking to show them something interesting.
However, Watson, all well said, but if the person expects that particular induction, it's not going to work as well.
Exactly.
Because how can you get a startle effect if the person knows you're going to scare them, or startle them?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to say boo and scare you. Boo. Ha! And so that doesn't happen.
And so that comes back to my question originally. Right. So if you're not going to get the spike, the PGO spike, unless you create a shock, unless you surprise them, unless you startle them, right? So if the induction depends upon creating a PGO spike to slip past the critical faculty, you can't get it if you don't get the spike.
If you don't get the startle or the novelty. Now, based on that as well, if they're expecting one sort of novelty or shock and you do a totally different one, you can still get it. And provided you maintain rapport and keep the pressure on them, you'll get them into trance. That's why someone like, Anthony Jacquin, who's phenomenal at that stuff. I mean, my hat goes off to him. He does a great job, and he will immediately, after shocking someone into trance, say, sleep and stand, sleep standing, sleep standing. So the person is being given instructions on what to do. Plus, he's maintaining their personal ecology, which is very, very ethical as well. He's one of the people out there I really like. I think he does some cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I want to shift to another area. This is more about humor now, Mike. And I want you to teach us all how to do this, because this is freaking hilarious. So press the blots. It's a very important, right? So
it is. It is, Chris.
I'll let you talk.
And the listeners, we talked about future trainings. And if you're looking at Stavengrenitz and you're going to say to yourself, if we're going to come out and do some kind of training like that, you're stepping back from the beginning and you're looking at the situation. Writing it's going to be press at the blots every single time.
Press at the blots.
Press at the blots. That's right. So Well, I'm saying just stupid nonsense things. But Chris and I love doing this, and so do a number of other students, just to freak people out. Because if someone is really listening and you back welcome them, and they're trying to step in from the foreground, and it's press at the blots every single time. They're trying to grab onto what you're saying. And the key is you don't mumble. You very, very state it specifically in such a comfortable way. Back then, like that. And they're like, what? Press at the blots. And we're saying this stupid stuff. But we've used it in restaurants. Chris has done it on telemarketers, and they go, oh, yeah, absolutely. You're saying, so you definitely have press at the blots. And they're saying, yes, we provide that as well. Not a clue what he's even saying. I think you got to mess with people's heads, because if you don't, who will?
And it's a lot of fun, right? So, okay, so for those
it's fun too. I never thought about that.
Yeah, so if you didn't catch it, I mean, essentially you're taking a phrase that is manufactured and means nothing at all.
Like press at the blots.
Press it, so Pressit, the B-L-O-T-Z. That's how we spell it. It means nothing. And you throw it into conversation. Now, I noticed Mike doing this, and that's why I've asked him to talk about this on the podcast. He'll make up these phrases that mean nothing. But what I noticed, I only noticed this last week.
Things that sound vague but are in reality meaningless.
But you don't just say them quickly and trying to hide them. You build up the curiosity.
Build up anticipation.
You build up the anticipation, so we're really paying attention. So Mike will say something like, so make sure that when you're doing a rapid induction, you're focused on calibrating to the subject, and then every single time. So that's the curiosity builder.
Spend more on it. Each time. Press at the blots.
And just says it very clearly, very congruently.
And watch people's eyes glaze over.
And because, you're so congruent about the delivery, people are looking at you like, I'm pretty sure you just said something meaningful, but I have no idea what the heck it was. And then you repeat it with even more congruence the second time.
You keep thumping your fist on the table. Stop making the emphasis. Okay, press at the blots. If we back it up a bit, there's one point I wanted to make. So I'm going to make another prediction here. I've called one hypnosis trainer to task for getting the term critical faculty incorrect. Saying critical factor. Now, the funny thing is, because I've corrected him, he can't change it because he's admitting that I've corrected him if he does. So he's forced to keep saying it wrong, which, of course, is even funnier. So he's in a double bind. My prediction is, now that I've begun talking about PGO spikes and all of these things and how these rapid inductions and instant inductions are affecting the brain, you're now going to start hearing from the other hypnosis trainers about PGO spikes because they can't ignore it. They have to act like it's part of their repertoire as well. It's Neuroscience 101, folks. It's why hypnosis works.
So where did you learn about this stuff, just out of curiosity? Because you didn't invent the idea of a PGO spike, nor are you claiming to.
My goodness, no, young man. No, but, I'm always keeping up on these things, and I read about it and began to apply it to my own hypnosis work after reading Human Givens Theory. And Human Givens Theory, which I think is phenomenal, out of Britain, explaining why people have mental illness and how to get rid of it, talks about PGO spikes and how that works in concert with hypnosis and setting up REM states. And I thought, my goodness, somebody's finally figured this out. My admiration for what they've done is just enormous. I mean, absolutely enormous.
Well, we've talked about Human Givens Theory quite a bit on this podcast, and I've tweeted out and mentioned them in tweets on Twitter, and I think they appreciate it, and it's great. I mean,
as you can imagine, Chris, there's a lot of resistance in the standard theories of the brain and the mind and personality and so on, and mental illness and hypnosis, to anything that seems to be new. But their theories are consistent. They make absolute sense, and I think it's a very useful model, and eventually people will admit they were right all along, and then people say, well, we knew it all along, and then they'll say, oh, we came up with it. So that seems to be the filters that all these things pass through.
Exactly. So I think we are pretty much out of time on this podcast. I think we got through most of the stuff we really wanted to cover, and I really wanted to touch on this hypnotizability stuff because we're seeing so much crap out there. And send us your feedback, folks, on what you want to see in a hypnosis forum. Now, with that
if you
said,
want to belong to it,
do you have a metaphor for us?
I do, Chris. I want to talk about Donald Thayne. Over the years, I had really, really good teachers, when I was a kid especially. And I was a bright kid. I got A+ in everything. I was blessed with a pretty sharp brain. And then I skipped grade 4. I went right from grade 3 to 5. I was put in a 5-6 mixed class, expected now to work at grade 6 level, which, of course, was impossible for someone who just left grade 3. I was, carrying a 3-ring binder to class, having carried a teddy bear before. And I went under a lot of stress because of this. evil teacher at the time who made my life a living hell, made me hate school. We wound up with my parents pulling me out of his class. We transferred to Wexford Public School when we moved. I transferred. My parents just took me there. And I had a great grade 6 teacher. I was 10 years old. His name was Donald Thane, and he was one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. Donald Thane made learning fun again. And in our class, we had a hive of live honeybees, bees that were vented to the outside. I can only imagine the insurance problems with that now. We had horned toads and tarantulas and snakes and white mice and models of the planets hung from the ceiling. He could make grammar fascinating. He was an immensely gifted young teacher and made my life amazing in grade 6. It was a class of honor students. We all fell in love with learning. And many years ago, I determined to try to find him, to tell him how he, like some other great teachers I had, Hickson Gracie, John Grinder, Bill Underwood, how they impacted my life, Derek Balmer, of course. And I hunted down Donald Thane, who was teaching at one of the universities in Southern Ontario, Canada. And I sent him a snail mail letter, this is pre-email, and said, if you are my grade 6 teacher, I want you to know that you made learning wonderful for me again and brought back that desire to learn that the other teacher had essentially crushed. And this man sent me a very nice letter, and he said, I am not your Donald Thane. I am another Donald Thane. I know who you mean. And he passed away a few years ago of a serious illness. And although I was sad to hear that Donald Thane had died, I was thrilled that I was able to get some sort of closure in this issue and thank the man, indirectly at least, who had made my life so wonderfully rich and interesting.
And so that is the end of podcast session number 23 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. Hope you enjoyed this one, folks. I know I did, and I always enjoy being on these podcasts with Dr. Mike, talking about hypnosis and all the wonderful stuff that he's got to teach us. So head on over to MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Make sure you get on our email list for all the awesome stuff that we've got for you.
Check out our new upcoming products.
Yeah, we got some cool stuff coming out, the video product on power inductions, and leave a rating on iTunes on the show, because that always helps improve the size of the audience that we get, and we can talk to more people about hypnosis. Send in your questions at MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and next time I promise we will handle more audience questions on hypnosis. So that's it, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll see you on session number 24.
Anushui aglaram winda lachachan dir mi sogwa arashund arquarad lachan dir moragle rasharangir moragderan glarachivisa lacharan Nirmahu Maranglana Rakhonda, and was there we called him Billy.